Yeah, you're live.
I'm double live. I'm stereo live. We are now live on YouTube and Facebook and everything else. I think I'm doing it right. We'll see. And all right. Hello, everyone.
So I think we want. So Rob, do you want to go first and just kind of answer any questions people have? Maybe a high-level overview of the PPP. I know that everyone's been a little uncertain given that this has been thrown on the banks, and the banks are still trying to figure out kind of the requirements, application process, and all of that. But I know that you definitely wanted to give everyone a high-level overview, answer a couple questions, and then we'll dive right into it.
Yeah, so as of 5 o'clock, sorry, my son's right beside me. As of 5 o'clock, we still haven't been given any guidance from the Treasury or the SBA as far as what the rules are for submitting applications. The most important thing that they're accepting them starting tomorrow, allegedly, but no lenders have been given any of the guidelines. That's my son swearing, so I'm a good example. So the biggest thing that you want to look out for right now is submitting an application tomorrow when nobody's been given the guidelines. If they might come back, and the lender that you're working with is probably going to come back and say, hey, I need these other things from you. The most important thing is that on the 30th of June, you're able to actually reap the benefit of this program, which is that it basically works like a grant. So you're not going to have to repay the loan. But if you submit it wrong, it's not going to work. And so the biggest risk you have is that you go to a lender and they say, hey, we know what we're doing. We're going to do this loan for you. We're going to take your application and we're going to process it and get you paid. That's great. What you're really looking for is not the payout tomorrow. It's the loan forgiveness program on June 30th. That's what you're really looking for. As far as I just got off a 2-hour call, as far as we know, nobody has been given the guidance. We're all asking the Treasury Department, we're all asking the SBA program, we're all asking, like, can you give us some guidance so we can make these loans the right way so that they qualify for forgiveness? And they still haven't given it to us. So it's unlikely that any lender that you're giving the information to tomorrow is going to actually be submitting an application tomorrow. They're probably holding on to it. They're probably pre-filling as much as they can in hopes that they have everything they need so they can send off the application when they're given the guidance. But it's unlikely that we know exactly what the guidance is going to be. The best thing you can do is be prepared. Know what the payroll piece of this is, how much you're going to be able to write off, have the documentation in place, how much your rent is for your space, and I think there's one other piece of it. But
so is it utilities, rent, yes, and payroll? Those are the three things that apply,
yes,
correct?
Yes,
okay,
that's right.
Awesome. And then in payroll, just to clarify, is it under 100K? Isn't that the guidelines to that?
Right. Yes, that's right. So you want to have it's employees under 100K, 2 months payroll. Sorry, Bear wants to say hello to everybody. Say hello, Bear. Hi. Okay. So that's sort of the cutoff there, and it's 2 months. They are probably going to look for documentation, like how long you've been paying that. They're going to look at your payroll, the payroll the taxes you've been paying for payroll to verify. So again, don't think that they're not going to look into this and just be like, oh, it's a crisis, we're not going to look at it. It's the SBA. They take everything very seriously. It's every I has to be dotted, every T has to be crossed. If it doesn't, they're just going to tell you on June 30th, like, we're sorry, you have to repay it.
Robert, this may be entirely wrong, but I was under the impression that the forgiveness is only in the case where, like, they thought you would be approved, but then it turns out you weren't, but they're just fast approving everyone now.
No, from what I understand, and what I'm seeing is that the forgiveness is for anybody. Sorry, I'm gonna get away from the noisy kids. So the forgiveness is for people that are. I think there's really not a lot of disqualifiers for that. But the forgiveness is if you do it the right way through the SBA and they approve that, then you're able to qualify for the forgiveness piece on the back half. So the most important part of this is making sure you don't disqualify yourself. This is a government body. So think of it like if you're applying for a visa, if you're applying for citizenship, if you do it wrong, you're either not going to get the forgiveness or you're going to be pushed back to the back of the line when you're reapplying, like resubmitting documents, resubmitting things on June 30th, like when your lender comes back and says, hey, you actually didn't qualify for the forgiveness piece of this. So then you're going to go back of the line, and then the light is, that's probably not the best scenario. We don't foresee a scenario where the SBA will not extend the amount of credit needed to fulfill its obligations. So people are worried about a shortage of funds. We don't think that's very likely. It could happen, but it's unlikely. It feels sort of like a toilet paper situation where people are afraid they're going to run out of toilet paper, but it's really like what politician in their right mind is not going to be rooting for the, like, approving this, the next loosening of funding when they're on the, like, when their election is up in like September, you know, like everybody's up for re-election. Nobody's going to want to be the person saying, no more government assistance to workers. That's just not going to happen.
Got it. Thanks, Robert.
That's it.
Anybody have any questions on that before we get to regularly scheduled programming? No? Okay, awesome. So, hi everyone. I'm over here. I'm in the space because there's a lot of folks here, and there's probably a bunch more joining soon. This is a little bit new for us because usually these WWW meetings are happening in person, but we're trying something new. Just so you guys all know, I'm also attempting, although probably incorrectly, to live stream this to Facebook. We'll see what happens. Yeah, all your questions, if you ask good ones, hopefully will be saved for, generations to come. So here's how this usually works, right? The whole idea here is that there's a lot of events out there where you can come and listen to some really smart person talk about some, semi-interesting topic for like 55 minutes. Then there's 5 minutes of Q&A, and then there's like networking afterwards, right? And if you want one of those events, you can go to any number of them, and there's never any shortage. What we're doing instead is all Q&A, right? So what we're doing is we're bringing to the table folks that have been there and done that. Usually it is like half dozen CTOs that have founded companies, exited companies, raised money, went IPO, gone through FDA, basically any sort of situation, both legal, technical, commercial, whatever that you could think of. And what we're trying to do here is shortcut either weeks or months of research that you might have in front of you, or best case scenario. Worst case scenario, weeks of months of doing the wrong thing, which costs you a lot of money and oftentimes puts you out of business. So today on the CTO side, we're doing this a little bit differently with the virtual thing. We're going to get better at it. We might also run these a little bit more often now that they're virtual. But we've got me. My name's Igor. I'm the president of FastCTO. And we've got Diego, who is on vacation. Also another seasoned CTO. We might have a couple more folks joining us. Ignacio down on the bottom right also looks like that picture was taken on vacation. There he is. So he's also part of our network and a very seasoned CIO.
Look at that beard. Holy cow, Ignacio. Teach me the ways of the Jedi of beard.
I know. It's only been like 2 weeks. You're muted. That's it's like a bingo we could play, right?
Stay home. That's the way to go. You don't need to do anything.
Very good. Very good.
No.
So Hi, Ignacio. So basically, the idea here is we get you drunk, although today you have to get yourself drunk. And then that lifts your inhibitions a little bit to ask the really tough questions, because, you know, a lot of people are a little bit embarrassed, right? Like, you don't want to be asking people, I've got this situation, how do I resolve it? And you wouldn't normally ask that. But we're actually giving you, you know, a safe space here, albeit live streamed. But if it makes you feel any better, we have 0 viewers right now. I don't have a very popular page, so it's still a very safe space. So yeah, just for context, so the questions that we've had in the past, don't hold back. It's anything goes, and it can be anything that's kind of technology adjacent, even to, for example, I've got like one developer here, one developer there. How do I make them work better together? Which is an example I always use, but even maybe a little bit more pertinent now. All the way down to we've had people actually pull one of us aside and have them look at a SQL query and be like, this SQL query is slow. What can I do about it? Which with screen sharing might even be a little bit easier. So yeah, that's it. That's the spiel. I have some stuff pulled up here in case it becomes relevant. But other than that, let's have a conversation. And if anybody wants to start with a question, jump right in. Or if not, I could prompt some stuff. See, this is where the drinking usually helps. Unless someone's on mute. If you're asking a question, oh, chat, there's no time limit. On the questions, we answer them for as long as you need. Yes.
Yeah, that's important. Ask the question you need, and we'll take as long as we need to answer it. So, or Igor will, Igor
or Diego, yeah,
or Diego or Ignacio, they're going to answer the question. So if it goes on for a half hour, that's okay.
No one. Everybody came to an event where the benefit is to ask CTOs questions, and no one came with questions.
I've got a question.
All right.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Croissant. I met Robert beforehand, and he's the reason why I'm here on this call. But I'm currently I am supposed to be out of Babson College, but they sent us all back, and back for me is in Chicago. But I'm planning on creating a startup based out of Boston, and had a lot of technical know-how to try and cover this summer, and just planning on bringing on a couple of technical co-founders. But considering that it's out in Boston, I don't want to then have a base here where I recruit people from the region. And so how would you recommend that I go about, still having Boston as the location for the business, but then communicating over that distance with these new technical co-founders that I'm still looking for?
That's a really good question, actually. So, and this is, your situation is maybe not super unique, but this is kind of a new world for everyone. I will say this: up until a lot of my answers today are going to be like up until 3 weeks ago, A, but now it's B. So like up until 3 weeks ago, right? There were parts of the world, parts of the country that had hotspots of startup communities, right? Like Boston's one, New York one, San Francisco, Austin, Chicago, a couple other ones, right? And so there are young entrepreneurs everywhere. There are colleges that give out technical degrees everywhere, right? But, for whatever reason, these hotspots get created. So what used to happen is if you go, let's say, on Angel List or one of these other like founder meetup sort of things, chances are if you meet someone, they're going to be from one of those hotspots because, they're hotspots, right? On all of those, you could also limit your search, obviously, to a specific location. I actually I have two parts to this answer. One is it's not hard to limit your search to Boston. And Boston has a lot of facilities, like a lot of like founder job boards, like through Venture Cafe, through Venture Fizz, through FastCTO. Even we line folks up all the time, but also maybe in the new world, so to speak, it's not that important for your co-founder to be in Boston, because it really doesn't matter. And in fact, to prove my point, Lee over here in well, I don't know if everybody has the same order of things. I don't know how Zoom works in that sense.
But
But
if I say hi, it might jump to my screen. So hello.
Oh, okay. So there's Lee. Lee is a new member of FastCTO. She's in Seattle. We got connected on Angel List, and the fact that she's in Seattle hasn't changed a single thing. Like a single thing. Diego's in Boston, but we have CTOs all over the world, working with clients all over the world, and it really isn't that like the only way it matters is like if you want someone that you can go grab a beer with, which is not a nothing for sure, but it's really not that big a deal. But if you are looking for co-founders and you understand all the caveats and the pros and cons of doing that, of like finding randos that you're not previously friends with, then you can go on Angel List. You can go on. I recently heard of one called The Pond, which is Tinder for co-founders, the way they explain it. I haven't used it, but yeah, it could be cool. But yeah, go out, find it. Boston or not Boston, it really doesn't matter. Does that help, or does that make things more confusing?
No, it helps because I've been so worried about it needing to be regional, because then eventually going to be renting out a space, and I'm like, oh, this has to be a room for the space, otherwise there's communication issues. But you're right, it's a different world that we live in. Like, all the traditional norms are kind of getting thrown, at a faster rate than we expect.
And chemistry, in my opinion, and by the way, it's not just me and Diego that could talk. Anybody, if you have other opinions, can jump in. But in my
I'll give an opinion after.
Okay, in my opinion, A, the chemistry, and B, your co-founder being able to pull their weight is much, much more important than their geographical location. Like, I've had startups that failed because of like co-founder chemistry, where my co-founders were in Boston. I have friends that live in Dallas and Chicago and San Francisco that I would start a startup with tomorrow in a second because I know it could work. So that's way more important.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt somebody else, so they were going to go first, but
go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Which have a talking stick.
You raised your hand first.
Oh yeah, I raised my hand. So I was just gonna say sometimes. So my co-founder and I, he's a male, and he actually started when we started the business. He lived in DC and I lived in Boston. And while we were doing the business on the side to begin with, it didn't, because we were such a great match, because we balanced each other's skill sets, because we had different strengths and different weaknesses, and we just were as passionate about the business. Our work ethic was the same. I mean, all of those things would outweigh the fact that we weren't in the same room. Eventually, like a year and a half later, then we were under the same roof. We lived in the same city. But sometimes you don't really know that you need that until it's kind of pressing. So let the business tell you that it's pressing, that you need to be under the same roof before you kind of make a bad decision on a poor co-founder, and instead kind of make the better decision on the right co-founder. And then naturally you can kind of find a way to, if the business is obviously taking off and it makes sense and you guys are in the right position to kind of move forward, then eventually you can always get under the same roof. So that would just be my perspective.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah, we kind of went through the same thing because, technically our business is founded in Florida, right? And that's just because that's Hurricane Central. But, for us to be in Boston as well is a huge benefit because there's access to the fintech community. So, we're doing payments and we're doing, dealing with insurance companies. So for us, it was like a blend was even better. So, but we struggled with it for a while. We're like, should I just move to Florida? And I was like, no, that's not going to happen.
No, don't. You're like 40 years too young for that.
Yeah.
And you appear to have all your teeth still, right? So Florida's not your spot.
Yeah. Not certain parts, no.
All right, very good.
So was your question more about how to find a co-founder, or was it more about how to communicate once you have that co-founder and you guys end up being remote?
It's
like
kind of it's like a blend between the two, because it's both that, I want to know where to be looking, because, I wasn't sure about the distance, but it sounds like you guys have had pretty successful experiences in the past with that, as well as then, communicating with them over that distance and like what ways then would be effective.
Oh, there are a ton of it seems like every company that's really good at remote work, it has been like releasing on LinkedIn, like their guide to remote work.
It's all the same guide, honestly.
Yeah, it's all the same stuff.
And even like companies that aren't good at remote work.
The biggest thing is communication and like setting expectations clearly. Everyone wants autonomy, even when they're in a normal office job. So making sure that you have structures of accountability that still embrace autonomy, so people don't feel like you're looking over their shoulder all the time. They feel comfortable and they feel trusted and they earn that trust, and they feel good about what they're delivering in terms of their work. Like all those things, regardless of whether it's remote or in an office, still exist. I think a lot of companies are like freaking out about like, oh, we have to change so much for remote. And there's certainly certain things like using Zoom that becomes different and important, for companies that haven't done remote. But a lot of the good management and organizational leadership principles that you would apply in a normal office setting apply to remote. I think communication becomes maybe even more important, like erring on the side of over communicating. But then also like learning to trust the people that you hire, because if you hire people and you have to be on top of them and you need to micromanage them to feel secure, then, one, that's a big personal issue, but two, you're hiring the wrong people, right? Because you should be able to hire folks that you trust and that deliver on their word and stuff like that.
Yeah, and for a co-founder, so I'll tell you this: the early sign. So my last startup, before FastCTO, failed because of just co-founder differences, namely being that I was the only one doing anything. But basically, one of the early warning signs for me was I had two other co-founders, so it was the three of us, and I called one of the guys, like we had a big demo, like a big demo the next day, and I called him at 8 p.m. on like a Tuesday to just like chat for a few minutes, and he was like, why are you calling me at 8 p.m.? I'm like, are you kidding me right now? like if I call you at 2 a.m., you should pick up. Like, we're co-founders. Like, this is like, we've put our life savings into this, so, and that's why, like, I'm going to go back. Chemistry is so much more important, right? Like everything else, if it's just you and a co-founder or you and another co-founder, the tools don't matter, right? Like, yeah, you're going to have Slack. Yeah, you're going to have like Google Meet, or if you're on G Suite or Zoom or whatever, but you're going to be texting and calling each other more than any of that, right? Like, honestly, the first like 6 months, you're going to be texting each other. You're going to be calling each other. Like Lee's been with me, like 3 weeks, right? It's literally just, so we use Slack to basically like, hey, you got 5 minutes, and then we call each other. It's like, that's all it is.
And I've done a lot of like trying to work remote from various countries. And one thing that I found invaluable is just have something like whatever site you choose that shows you different time zones, because as far as coordination goes, getting the time zone right and not having to like go through all of that is a massive time saver.
That's true. Yeah. I had, I'm on Mac now. I don't know how to do it, but on Windows, when you click on the time, you could set up different time zones. So if you have different people in different time zones, you like any time of the day can click and just see like, okay, here's what's going on in Kiev, here's what's going on in Israel, here's what's going on wherever.
Yeah, I think that's where like the communication piece comes into play again, where you have to be clear about like overlap hours. Like it might be depending on where you are in the world that you only overlap for 3 or 4 hours in terms of like a reasonable working day. So making sure that everyone is clear about, okay, these are the hours where like we're going to overlap, and you know, barring anything big, like everyone's going to be online and it's going to be reachable on Slack or, you know, whatever. That, I think that's an important part, especially with the time zone difference.
Yeah, I have a very different, like when I do a startup, basically everything else takes a second tier to it. So like every startup I've ever done, like the implicit and sometimes explicit expectation is literally 24/7. Like if you're my co-founder and you need to reach me, like call me, show up at my house. It doesn't matter, right? Because like that's what, now I have 2 kids. So now it's like a slightly different, but up until then, it's basically like you're all in. Like either you're all in or you're wasting your time with startups.
Yeah, and it's your relationship to establish, like, you know, like the boundaries. It's like a romantic relationship. Like, you know, you set up boundaries. This is what works for me. This is my love language, right? The same stuff applies to co-founders. Like some people like to communicate in certain ways. Other people are very emotional, you know, like whatever it might be. Like figure out what it is that you need to feel like things are getting done, and just communicate it and hash it out, you know?
Yeah. Diego, I keep expecting your hair to like wave in the wind because it's throwing me, honestly.
I need to get a fan in here.
Igor, I keep expecting your hair to start floating because you're in space.
I could float up. Ooh. Anybody else?
Yeah, thanks for all the tips.
No problem. What's a startup? While people are thinking of other questions.
So I'm creating a campus security startup that helps bridge the communication gap between students and campus security. And so by way of a personal accessory and integrated system on campus, both students are able to communicate and reach out to campus security much more effectively, and campus security is able to respond to situations much more quickly and effectively.
Oh, that's awesome. There was a I forget the name of it. There was a woman that had a startup that I saw at a Startup Palooza a couple of years ago that did that with a wearable jewelry piece.
Oh, like the one for elderly people.
It's Invisaware.
So it's something like that, but this was actually like a fashionable, like a necklace or a bracelet or something, and basically it's geo-fenced, and so if you're on campus, you could set it up to ping your location to security, and if you're off campus, it's 911 or your like emergency contacts. It was pretty cool. I don't know if they ever kind of went anywhere, but yeah, there's been a couple of things in this vein.
There's Invisaware, and yeah, as if it is Invisaware, she has been successful. So she specifies in, like you had said, kind of like the hot dialing specific contacts and saying them your location via the geofencing.
Yeah, that wasn't the name of it, but she might have rebranded. Okay. That's the one where you put the braces on, and if you double tap your teeth, it calls your friends. Invisaware. Bad joke.
I like the joke. I like it. Keeps your teeth straight too.
There's a one that does for public schools, so that would include campuses, and they reroute to like 911 and SWAT teams and all that for like bomb and shooting scares. It's a Boston company called Enforce Technologies, and they're kicking some serious ass. So this is like a necessary service.
Yeah.
If you want to connect with that founder, I can hook you up.
I would love to.
All right.
There we go.
Your jokes become better in space.
It's because no one can hear them in a vacuum. No, that's actually one of the big problems with a lot of sci-fi movies, because sound needs air to transfer. And so if you hear an explosion in space, it's actually like you won't hear an explosion in space. Anyway.
Hard to grasp the gravity of what you're saying.
What do they call a toilet on the International Space Station? Well, it's really high tech, so they call it an OG whiz.
I like it. I like it. Does anyone have any?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I started a startup in October. So I reached out to a friend from college. She wasn't an engineer, but she had she is a project manager, like a technical project manager. So she's used to working with developers and stuff. So so she's basically on my team helping me work with the developers that I have in India. And I realized that like her technical ability and her assessment isn't, I feel like I do a better job in just, troubleshooting the website and going through everything. And I actually went to a workshop like a month ago and I heard about FastCTO and I'm like, man, I wish I heard about this company a couple months ago. But so I don't really know how to transition her. Like she wants to eventually work up to be a co-founder. So I don't know how to transition her out or keep her on a team and just have her do something else. But I just don't think she has enough technical, knowledge to work.
That's fine. Do you have any like legal structure right now? Like is she on like a vesting schedule for?
No, she wants it, and so I told her that I'm going to put one together and eventually do that for her, but I haven't yet. If it's not working for whatever reason, the onus is on you to sit down with her and articulate why it's not working. And also it's up to you to either give her an opportunity to correct it or to just let her go. Because if she's not providing value, then why are you keeping her around? If she's providing kind of enough value to keep around for now, but you don't want her to stay in the long term, like that's not completely fair to her. That she's investing time and energy, right?
And it's also what advisors are for, right? Like I've actually done that where you start something with someone, you realize they're not all they should be, and you basically say, hey, why don't we drop you down to an advisor status because the value you bring is short term or like not a co-founder status. You drop her to like a half a point, whatever it is. But Diego's spot on, right? Like as hard as it is, it's your company, right? If you ask anyone, including me, or any lawyer, like you should have legal structures in place. It's a double-edged sword. The fact that you don't could have really screwed you later on, but in this case may work in your favor because it's less things you have to undo to offboard her, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. But then once you do offboard her, make sure that you're doing things the right way. And I don't want to turn this into a pitch for FastCTO. I saw Robert literally started laughing when you started asking your question. Yeah, no. So this is your problem is literally what we're here to solve, right? And I'm just gonna say this once, hopefully. This whole event is not a sales pitch for FastCTO. Our mission is we don't make money off of startups, but basically your problem is exactly what we're here to fix, right? Is that founders like you, don't know what they're getting yourself into, don't know what the options are, don't know what the costs are, and you go and you throw out a lot of time and a lot of money, and then you're out of money, and then you don't have a company, and it's a really bad situation. So I'll pause there and just say, ping me afterwards, and I can explain to you what you could do. Okay, thank you.
Igor, and just another comment to that is, I think in any relationship that you enter into within a startup, right, you have to have a way to measure the value that you're exchanging and what you're expecting from each other. And then even for advisors, I mean, Igor mentioned an advisor, but even an advisor, right, these people that is helping you for some reason, sometimes for equity, sometimes not. But even for advisors, you should have a time limit, and at that time you're going to revisit that relationship and decide if you want to continue. But you always have to have an exit strategy for when things are not working, and and try to act fast, because I mean you have no time to waste, and whenever things are not working, you better kind of fix it right away.
Yeah, you know, there's a really important kind of quote in a lot of teams is hire slow, fire fast, right? which I don't know if I agree with wholeheartedly, because you know, whatever, but certainly don't let it linger. And actually, since we are live, we're getting comments from all over the world, although all over the world is really just Boston. But Andy Jacques of Founders Live just said, you know, don't let it linger. And if it's an emotional decision for you, especially because she's a friend, so you're gonna be more likely to let it linger, but don't, right? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to start a real business, and this is a fiduciary, you know, thing. So you gotta remove your emotions from it a little bit, to an extent. I always like to start companies with friends, but also you have to draw the line of where you're talking like business decisions. Very
and
good.
I mean, if you're doing it right, your friendship will transcend any kind of business relationship. Like, you know, when I die someday, you know, like the people coming to my funeral are not like representatives of the different companies that I work for. It's like all the friends.
I'll be there, Diego.
You gather. So if you're treating people with respect and the way that you want to be treated, and you're being fair, you're communicating, you're being honest about what's working, what's not working, and you're trying to work on things, then, you know, then things are going to be fine. You know, just honestly, it's like, you know, I mean, if it's not working, it's not working. You can still be friends. And you owe it to her even more, because you're already friends, to be honest with her and be like, hey, you know, this isn't working, but, you know, let's keep being friends, or move her to an advisory kind of role if she's interested, you know. Right by both of you guys, basically.
Very good.
Yeah. I know I need to do that.
It's hard though. I get it. It's hard. Breaking up is hard, but you need to do it sometimes.
Yeah. Very cool.
Thank you guys.
No problem. Stick around. There'll be other questions.
Okay.
Maybe. Hopefully. Otherwise, we'll just sit here and drink. It'll be one of those Zoom happy hours that everyone's having. Does anybody have any other questions? Guys, you're killing me.
Can you get any virtually, Igor, from the audience that's watching?
I am, but so far it's just been Andy Lyons and Andy Jacques, who I really love. I really love your support, guys. Thank you so much. But they've been peppering me with questions. Oh, Andy Jacques asking. Actually, I could show this. Rob. Oh, but you guys can't see it because it's a different thing. Rob, what whiskey are you sipping on?
I'm on to Knob Creek. I finished off my dirty water, so just a basic Knob Creek.
Nice. I've got Japanese over here. Oh, you can't see it. Wait. Whiskey in space. I don't know. It's Suntory. There it is. I don't know. I'll get better at this. Look, I didn't go to school for media. I'll figure it out. This is new for everyone. John Gwinner, you've got the most impressive background, because this is custom made. It's got your initials in the background. It looks like you've built yourself like a underground dungeon that's dedicated to you.
Correct. So I have my title, and then what I do, and that's my logo, and that's the book I published. So yeah, it was done in a 3D software called Vue, V-U-E. It's French, so apparently it's pronounced Vue, not Vue. So yeah, I figured if I'm going to get on, I might as well advertise my book.
That's actually incredible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
but I wrote it in 2017, and it's like virtual reality. Well, Facebook has changed the whole interface, so 3 years is an eternity when it comes to technology on the internet.
Yeah, John's actually a CTO in the network. He's in LA. So if you have any VR questions, or really anything, I don't know, how to make a custom Zoom background.
That's easy. You just click on the little up arrow next to show video, and then you go to settings. But I think what you meant was how to actually make this.
Yeah, no, I don't have. Mine will just be done in Paint. Just my name.
Frankly, Photoshop, or I like to use Inkscape because it's free, and then that way I don't have to worry about subscribing to it and all that stuff. GIMP is good, but Inkscape is really good for doing things like layering backgrounds. So you can throw logos together and stuff like that. I saw somebody do one literally in the middle of a Zoom conference on how to do Zoom conferencing. She joined, and then 5 minutes later, bam, she had a custom background, which was pretty impressive.
Maybe the next one. Maybe the next one. And all right. Well, guys, I mean, we've never had this before. Oh, we've got chat questions. Hold on. Can you share the other screen? So I'm doing. Lisa, I'm actually gonna get to your question in a second, but I can't share the other screen because basically what I'm doing is I'm live streaming the full screen Zoom view. Because that's the only thing I could figure out how to do.
Oh, that would be weird. It'd be like a hall of mirrors.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all I'm doing now. But we could do something later. But right now, Lisa from Faceted Beauty says, "Can you share a scenario or two when it's best to start searching for a CTO and when it's not?" All right. So here's the thing. I actually have a controversial answer to that if I could figure out how to hide chat. So a CTO for a startup is a role and not a person. And I actually have a deck that I'm happy to send to everyone here. So Founder Institute, which is an amazing early stage accelerator, Ignacio, who is, I think, entering Lowell, but is maybe just sitting on the side of the road in front of Lowell down there. Oh, Lexington, sorry. Your head was blocking it. I thought it was Lowell. I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
But, he runs. Oh, and then there's actually Lowell. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I got a question.
But let me just answer Lisa really quick. So I mentor a class for Founder Institute called Product Development, all about sort of like what to expect, all that kind of stuff. The deck is very helpful, and it talks exactly about your question about when to start looking for a CTO, what does it mean, all that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, right, when you're thinking about big established companies, you're thinking about a CTO who's a person, right? But for startups, a CTO is a role, right? Like you've got to set the architecture, you've got to set the development culture, DevOps, all this kind of stuff, right? You need to have all those check boxes checked. It could be by one person, it could be by multiple people, but it's very rarely by a technical co-founder or by one person, because most people that are founders of startups don't have 30 years of experience to be able to check all those check boxes, right? So the whole idea, again, not a pitch for FastCTO, but the whole idea of FastCTO is that everybody needs a CTO, but early stage startups don't need a full-time CTO, and you're good with just a couple hours here and there of someone that really knows what they're doing, knows your domain, knows your industry, to give you what the best practices are, so that your technical co-founder or developer or dev shop, wherever, can go and implement that thing. And the reason that we work, for example, with Founder Institute, which is a super early stage accelerator, where most of the companies there aren't even incorporated, like incorporation is part of the track, right? Is because you really need this on day one. Because as soon as you start thinking about like, I want to have a startup, that's when people start messaging you, and that's when you start throwing out money a little bit here, a little bit there, and all of a sudden, like the 30, 40, 50K you've had earmarked to bring your startup to light, it just dwindles, right? For most startups. Obviously not everyone's in that position, but for most startups, right? So that's what we're there to help. So check out the website, but again, not trying to sell you anything, honestly. Yeah, Robert, you can keep laughing, but it's, that's the thing. And then we had.
It happens every WWW we do, and I know you're not planting people, but it really ends up being like it ends up being a great infomercial for you.
And now it's live to all of 2 people that are watching worldwide. Thanks, Andes. All right, we got another one. I have another question whenever you would get to it, but I don't want to take other opportunity. Oh, well, just, yeah, ask it. T. Croissant.
I think that had Lowell, or if I don't know how to pronounce the name, but I think you said you also had a question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So more of a technical question. So, so I'm developing a platform that's pretty much bootstrapped up to this point. We borrowed a little bit of money from friends and family, right? But so the question is, as you're developing and your costs aren't that expensive when you're bootstrapping, then you have some trades. One of the trades is speed versus technical efficiency. And of course, if you're a computer scientist or software engineer, you're always looking at, I want to make things as efficient as possible. But when do you decide to? I don't know if you face that challenge or not, but when would you decide that? Okay, we're not going to do that because that's going to cost too much trying to chase that technical efficiency.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the question.
Every day. So, and John and Diego, jump in if you have other thoughts on this. But basically, it's not a line in the sand of like we get to a certain point and we start thinking about it. Every decision that your technical team or whoever leads that team makes every day has to incorporate that perspective, right? Because with software development, like you've heard, like there's 9 ways to skin a cat. There's like 1,000 ways to skin a cat, right? And that's a whole other topic of like, like when you talk to a junior developers are very good at saying like, you tell me what to do and I can make it happen, right? Because any developer can make something work, but make it work well and be maintainable, right? And so it's the same thing with anything else. Like there's so many ways to make something work, and every single decision you make has a cost component of like now versus later, has a performance component, has like all these other components. And one of the problems that a lot of startups get into is like the decisions that are being made during development of your MVP stick with you for years, and sometimes they'll, in a good way, sometimes, usually in a bad way. Does that make sense? Lowell, you don't have, is that your name or is that just where you're from?
No, that's actually me, right?
Okay.
Most places are named Lowell. I'm named after a place, I guess. I don't know why my parents named me Lowell.
All right.
Hey, you could be named after the place I'm named after of, so.
That's good. We've got Redmond, who's also a name named after a place. But yeah, so it is an everyday thing, right?
Right. So it sounds kind of like sorry, if it's something that that's gonna stick with you for a long time, because it's going to be technically difficult for people to go back in there and make those changes, then maybe that's part of the trade and the decision that we're better off to go ahead and just eat the cost in the beginning, or eat the cost where we're at, and then move forward from there.
To an extent, yeah.
And it really, like, this is where experience really comes into play, because when you as an engineer, like as we're learning and throughout our careers, we're making mistakes, right? And we're hopefully learning from those mistakes and growing from them. So this is a kind of situation where, having made lots of mistakes, you can kind of go back to that and be like, okay, well, I don't want to make a lot of those mistakes this time around. And it's kind of like a delicate dance. It's like, one of these like more of an art than a science kind of situations, because there are lots of choices that you have to be very mindful of making for the sake of time, or like, speed to market type of consideration. when you're an early stage startup. And so it's like, how do you cut certain corners now, but do so in an intelligent way that you don't have to make up a lot for down the road, right?
Yeah.
So like, where are the trade-offs? Because there aren't enough time and resources, right? It's a resource constrained problem. So you have to make choices, and really, making a lot of mistakes over the years is how you're like, okay, well, I chose to do it this way, that time, and that was awful, like I'm not going to avoid doing unit tests until the very end again, or kind of a thing. So.
Yeah, I will say, like a lot of, we say this to a lot of clients, shortcuts are okay as long as you know you're making them, right? So the worst position you could be in is when you're making shortcuts without knowing they're shortcuts, and they come back and bite you in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is.
And you want to document them too. Like you want to document, like, and kind of, it's almost like you're setting up a plan for yourself, so that you can, it's not really a plan, you're just like documenting, you're keeping a list of, kind of the decisions you're making technically from like an architectural perspective, that then hopefully you can like, will be top of mind, you can reason on and dance around it.
Everything, like every decision that you make needs to have arguments behind it, whether they're right or wrong or short term or long term. I'll give you like an actual horror story. This happened to one of our clients, So imagine this. This is a company that's creating a platform whose clients are retail stores, right? And so they've raised money, and they've spent a good part of a year building this platform. They spent like $500,000 or so building this platform, and without really thinking about it. And honestly, how could they have thought about it? They are hosting everything on AWS because why not? They got a good deal on it, right? So now they've got a number of letters of intent from possible clients. So they finished, and literally 11th hour, right? Like they just went live, and they're going back to the companies that said like we'll pay for it as soon as you go live. And literally, like as they're signing the contract, the CEO looks up and says like, "Oh hey, just out of curiosity, where are you hosted?" And then they say AWS, and they're like, "Whoa, full stop. We're not paying any company that's giving money to our competitor," because now there's this weird movement in the retail space where they won't do business with companies hosted in AWS because they feel like they're just paying the competition, right? How, like without experience, how could you ever know, right? So now they just spent $500,000 like building this thing, and they can't launch it. And now they're spending like this was fall of last year. So they basically spent the last 6 months re-platforming on I think Azure, right? Like for no reason other than just perception, right? And so the thing is, you can't fault the CTO for that. I don't know if they had a CTO. They brought us on when they realized that this is happening, right? But I can't fault the developer for that. I can't fault the CEO for that. Nothing like that. Could experience have raised as a red flag? For sure, right? But assuming that these things happen, right? What I can tell you is that their architecture was such that moving them from AWS to Azure was not trivial, right? And they didn't know this, right? Like they didn't know this. And so when you're buying into one of these cloud hosting, like you have to understand that they're all the same up to a point, right? And then they diverge. And then you've got a bunch of proprietary stuff on all three, right? You've got all sorts of like AI, ML stuff and like map stuff on Google. You've got DocumentDB and all this kind of stuff on Azure. You've got AWS has Snowflake and all this kind of stuff. Google has BigQuery. So like if all you're doing is like something super, super simple, you can lift and shift. You can take it out of one, put it in the other. Maybe it's like a week or two of work, but it's not a big deal. But once you actually build up a serious infrastructure, it gets difficult. And the thing is, it's okay that it does. It's not okay for you to not be aware. of what parts like you're bought into, right, Lowell? Like that. So this comes back to your question, right? Like every decision you make, like when I tell my super early stage clients, they ask me all the time, like, okay, where do I host? AWS, Azure, GCP. Those are the big three. And 90% of the time, my answer is whatever you can get the most credits for, right? Because if you're part of like GSV Passport or First Republic or whatever, like you get a ton of credits for whatever. It's whatever you get credits for, unless you're doing something esoteric, and then you have to be really, really careful. Because if you go the wrong way, replatforming, which is almost certain to happen, is going to put you out of business.
There was I think there was a second part to your question. I think you were also asking, and maybe I'm wrong, a little bit about how do you know, so you've been bootstrapping up to this point, how do you know when to kind of potentially make this shift so that you're still making good business decisions and raising potential capital to make the right business decisions. So was that part of your question at all? Like the raising point, like is there a point where you start to raise capital because it's like, hey, we need to pony up this money, or was that not part of your question? I thought that was.
No, it's very intuitive. That's my next question is so we're in the last stages of platform development, and we're just days away from launch, or from I'm working on debugging right now, but we're very close to launch. So what are the next steps? What are the next costly steps? And I kind of see that more as the marketing side of that, as being the cost. At least we kind of see this as being, we're hoping for a growth curve that's fairly good. Everybody does, right? But we've got a large TAM, if you will. And we expect, we think we've got a good pull for growth, but the marketing side of it isn't something that we can really bootstrap on our own, right?
Can you spend just 30 seconds and give us a little bit more about your company, just so there's a little context?
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, so Flash Monkey is a
Flash Monkey. I like it. I'm sold.
Essentially, it's a learning platform that is somewhat like a flashcard, if you will, but it's far more. It's multi. Forgive me. It's multimedia, interactive, and intelligently detects what the problems are. So you can do two things: you can study on it, or you can teach on it. So it's right now it's on it's on laptop and desktop.
Who is the target? Is it high school, college, middle school?
It is high school and up. So it could be the professional industry. It could be college students, college scale educators.
Yeah. It
could be used at the lower level. It's a flashcard style. But I think anybody who really wants to use flashcard, interactive flashcards, multimedia interactive.
Yeah, that's really cool. So basically, look. So I don't want to kind of extrapolate what problems you might have, right? For sure, because it could be just very well built everything. But basically, the way to think about it is when you launch, that's when your roadmap basically gets split up, right? And then you have a chunk of your roadmap that's internally driven, and you have a chunk of your roadmap that's client driven, right? And then you have to make those decisions of like, what's a priority day to day, week to week, sprint to sprint, however you're running it, right? And so what happens, not all the time, but often, is that's when founders realize the maintenance issues in their applications, right? Because basically when you hire someone to build an MVP, you give them a scope, that scope has some requirements, like it must do this, and without someone that kind of leading the architecture, what happens is a lot of dev shops, and I don't know what your development is, whether it's in-house, offshore, or whatever, but a lot of folks basically just build to spec, right? And then what happens is you launch, you start getting all of these like feature requests from clients or from you, like from demos, things like that. And then you realize that, hey, the way it's built, adding what's seemingly a simple thing is, a $5,000 quote, a $10,000 quote, because it's 2 weeks of work, 3 weeks of work, right? And in your head, you're like, why, right? This is like a really simple thing. And that's because it goes back to the architecture piece, right? Like, you need to have good architecture, but you often don't know you don't until you launch. So that's an example, Lowell, right? Like, there's other examples, but that's one that seems like it could be pertinent to you. Does that help at all?
Yeah, well, I expect that we're going to have issues when we begin to scale. Although we've got a pretty lightweight platform, at least online in AWS. We don't really rely on AWS at all. Most of our processing is done offline. So any problems that we have will pretty much be within each system, so we have to push out new software. But yeah, so the next, so that will be one of the next issues, and then of course marketing, getting that working and pushing it out to the students and making people aware.
Marketing is the kind of, like, if you ask most angel investors, and by the way, just for context, I'm an angel investor with Beacon Angels, but if you ask a lot of angel investors, like, that's what they want to spend money on, right? Like, when you come to pitch, I want you to already show traction and like the value proposition and financial projections. And basically, I want you to come to me and say, like, look, if only I had $50,000, $100,000, $300,000 to like get this out in front of people, then we're a unicorn. Then like that's what investors respond to, right? So it seems like you're actually in pretty good shape for that, from what I'm hearing.
You done any benchmarking or load testing?
Benchmarking, yeah, we've got internal testing, if you will. Typical JUnit stuff, and then speed tests. Just, it's one of the questions about efficiency. Your trade, where you're using parallel processing just to speed things up.
How did you end up with Java?
Just by education. It was the direction that I went in. So I'm a recent guy. I've recently gone into software engineering. I spent after that, I worked for a large engineering company, defense engineering company. I ran a couple of programs there, worked with some sharp guys, and then decided I would go torture myself for 4 years and learn software engineering. And we just defaulted to Java, and I just stuck with it.
Yeah.
Platform to help me, so that I wouldn't have to take too many courses over again.
Yeah.
And Flash Monkey started that in that location.
Yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with Java. I'm just curious. You don't see a lot of startups like starting in Java. There's a lot of kind of legacy systems in Java, but there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it. And I'm just curious how, yeah.
Yeah, the reason I was asking is there's a big difference between a speed test and a load test. I've seen code that works really fast that just wouldn't go into production at all, because sometimes the trick to make certain SQL speed up actually makes it less concurrent. So that's why I was asking. We would usually do like a test where we would literally get people on keyboards and just pound orders in for an hour and see what it would do to the system. And that was often an eye-opener.
Okay. Yeah, that makes good sense. That's I don't anticipate that. That's probably the key word.
Yeah.
That may be a problem. But we really don't have a whole lot that's going to be that depends on that kind of a channel, if you will, or a bottleneck. Our website is very light; doesn't do much at all. You pretty much download the app, and the rest is handled through the app individually.
All right, very cool. I'm gonna throw a bonus, a cherry on top. There was a company that came across my radar a few months ago, whose target audience was also high school, and they've been around for a couple of years, and their marketing strategy was basically to the parents. They were like test preparation type stuff. So they marketed to the parents, and last year or about a year ago, they switched their strategy to market to schools, and they basically went to schools and said, "Hey, bring us in for a free workshop, like no cost to you whatsoever. Bring us in. We'll pick a cohort of students that are maybe like on the lower level of some classes or whatever. We'll do a free session, and then we'll leave them with a flyer to take home to their parents." And they saw, like, I'm not going to pull numbers out of the air, but like a huge increase in sales with that approach. Just as an FYI.
That's a wonderful approach, except right now.
Well, yeah, all the schools are closed. Yeah, for sure. But in general, once the schools are back open, all of that. I mean, and by the way, like, the sales cycle is pretty long, as you could probably imagine, especially like with you, but especially if you go the school route. So even though the schools are closed now, like the school administrators, I don't know how busy they are right now, right? Because basically they've handed all the like day-to-day like Zooms and everything down to the teachers. So now might actually be a pretty decent time to go knock on their door and be like, "Hey, while you're waiting, let's set you up to like hit the ground running next year."
That's a good idea. If I had more help, I would start pushing that avenue.
Yeah.
That's kind of the next step, is moving in that direction once these few lines are coded on. Very good.
For sure.
Thanks.
No problem. We've got a question from the world. Speaking of funding round, oh, here, I could actually show this on the thing. Speaking of funding rounds, as an angel investor, can you explain how investors may conduct due diligence process on your actual technology, product roadmap, infrastructure, besides just hosting? So I don't know how many people this is applicable to, but it's actually a really good question. Well, let me leave that up. So usually at this point, I'm like, raise your hand if you think that fundraising is in front of you. But I'll do this anyway. Raise your hand if you think that like in the next year or two, you're going to fundraise for whatever startup you have. Lowell, you don't have your camera on. You probably, are you one of the botched haircuts we hear about?
Me? No, I just haven't gotten the camera situation fixed. So
Got it. Yeah.
Fixed by next
I've seen a bunch of stuff for the last week of like, because all the barber shops are closed. So like people are attempting to give themselves haircuts.
I'm definitely one of the botched haircut situations.
But that hasn't changed, right? That's just
no.
Very good.
Up as usual is like the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like I've never seen Robert in like sweatshirt.
Yeah, seriously. He just turned off his thing. He's like, don't look at me. All right. No, I get it.
I tried to hit the mute button and I actually minimized. I think like the hardest thing about this whole situation is like me going back to wearing a shirt, like a real shirt. I'm loving this sweatpant life.
Yeah, I haven't worn real pants in several weeks. I went to Costco the other day in sweatpants, which is a new thing for me because why not? Anyway, back to the question. So here's the thing. This is actually surprisingly important, even though I'm going to leave it on a cliffhanger. So due diligence is hugely, hugely important, right? Like if you are going to raise any sort of money beyond a couple $1,000s from friends and family, like if you have someone you don't know giving you money, they're going to do some level of due diligence, right? And due diligence basically typically has 3 sections. Can you see 3 in space? Yeah, look at that. So it has 3 sections. It has legal, it has operational, and finance. Those are sometimes same, sometimes different, and technical, if you're doing anything technical, right? Legal and finance will always, always, always happen. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a flower shop or like the next Salesforce or like Google, you'll always have legal and finance due diligence to make sure that like your books match up with reality, that your like anybody that you're employing, all of your clients have proper legal contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And technology is always an asterisk, right? Because depending on how technical the thing that you're doing, some investors will do due diligence and some won't. And specifically more technically involved, I guess you could say, investors will do due diligence and some won't. So, you know, there used to be a time where I told everybody, like, you have to have your tech in shape because you're going to have a technical due diligence. It's honestly not the case. And I've been personally surprised by it. We've had a number of clients. It's like, you know, one of the things we do, like the premise of FastCTO is you work with a FastCTO that's been through due diligence a number of times. So like, as we're helping you build a thing, we're making sure that there's not going to be any red flags for when due diligence comes, right? Just de facto, right? But it's been surprising to us that a couple of our clients that have gone through due diligence recently, like, they didn't really do tech. Like, it blew my mind, right? Here's a SaaS platform that you are giving money to scale, and you're not even checking if it can. So it was weird to me. It was honestly weird to me. I don't know if it's a New England thing. I don't know if it's just like I'm in a weird bubble or anything like that. But yeah, it's like 50-50. And if you talk to you know, most of the folks on this call are still New England based and who are watching live. But if you talk to some of the like the bigger VCs like Open or One Way Ventures, for example, Simeon Dukac, the guy who's you know, famous for like the 21 like the blackjack movie, right? I asked him you know, like, what kind of due diligence you do, and he literally told me it's like 90% just a gut feeling. You know, because at some point, if you have enough money, like, what's $100K to throw in some direction, apparently, right? So yeah, so basically prepare for the worst, but know that it's not always going to happen. Like you want to go into fundraising being ready for technical due diligence, but it's the case these days that it doesn't always happen. But we'll still make sure that you're ready for it if it does. Who is the Lego person? Eric Chan. Welcome, Eric.
Hey guys, it's Eric. Sorry for joining late. I had another meeting.
No, it's fine. We've just been drinking.
I guess, yeah, it's probably that time on the West Coast. I could probably do that. Let's see, how did I hear about this? I heard about this because I think Kara invited me.
Thanks,
How does
Karen.
I think it's through GSV.
All right,
Yeah,
fantastic.
And oh, I see Kate also, who I know.
Here. Seth
Great.
was here a bit earlier.
Awesome.
Okay. So
Thanks
I've been working with GSV, I guess, for 2 years now, on and off, both in San Mateo and in Boston, as kind of like a mentor, but also been doing workshops for people who've been part of the GSV community.
Awesome. Happy to have you. You might be our first. Are you currently on the West Coast?
Yeah, San Francisco,
So,
or well, near San Francisco.
yeah. So I think, well, you're the second because John's in LA.
Yeah, I'm in the Bay Area as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
What? We're cross country now. Diego, we're cross country. Well, you're in Bahamas somewhere, so I don't know, but that's fantastic.
Hi there, Kate here. I didn't introduce myself. I also joined late, but I run our San Mateo office for GSC Labs. And since we're going virtual right now, we thought we'd invite the whole community, so you got a couple of them. Yeah, no,
this is wonderful. I gotta say, we're gonna get better at this. Usually it's kind of weird. So we're like a gas when it comes to events. Robert's laughing, right? Like we fill out whatever room we're in. So when we do these at GSV Boston, like if they put us in like a 10-person room, we'll have 10 people. If they put us in a 50-person room, we'll have 50 people. But with virtual, it's kind of difficult. So we'll figure this out. We'll build it up, and we could also run these. Now that I'm supplying my own whiskey and I'm not dependent on Robert.
I haven't seen you take one drink, by the way, Igor. I've been watching you like a hawk.
Hold on, that's all I'm doing here. Hold on, let me.
Yeah, right.
I'm gonna turn this green screen off. Hold on, I'm gonna prove it. So, first of all, I gotta say, the light in my bedroom broke. Like first week of isolation, and Home Depot's closed, so that's why I have the space thing on, and I've got like a little light strip over there. But I'm drinking this, which I opened, which I'm a little bit into, and I even have a side thing of ice. Oh shit! And I just spilled on my keyboard, which I'm gonna fix right now.
The slow CTO here.
Seriously, where was it? Oh boy. All right. Anyway, I'm drinking. You don't have to worry about me.
I don't believe you now.
All right. So let's see. We've got.
I think Tommy had another question.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't want to steal anybody else's spotlight.
No, please.
So I just explained that venture that I'm working on with campus security, and I've been doing that for about the last 3 years, just slowly building up. However, because of this whole COVID-19 crisis, it's recently opened up a unique opportunity for a different idea that I'd had that I haven't been pursuing, because there's that famous moniker of having too many irons in the fire to be able to actually get anything up to heat. But I have another platform that I had previously thought up and just put on the back burner while I was working on this, that now has a very unique market opportunity given the increase in demand of. It's a virtual platform for note sharing. As a student who grew up in like the more digital age, I'm very familiar with the million different ways that students communicate notes and talk to each other. And so I wanted to create a streamlined platform that both allowed students that took great notes to be able to profit off them in a reasonable way, and then allow for other students to, get their lecture notes and get their, advice and whatnot without having to possibly put up any capital themselves, and being able to do so in a way that then they can focus in class when they have all that stuff pre-prepared. So I was creating this platform and then just didn't really go with it because I didn't feel right at the time. But now I have this unique new market opportunity. Do I continue with the one that I've been developing for 3 years with, you know, the upcoming challenges, take advantage of the market opportunity. Another balancing situation I'm trying to figure out, and I'd love to hear your opinions.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, since I'm looking around, I'm the only one that's off mute, so I'll start. Here's I have a couple of things to say. So first of all, obviously both of these have their own challenges, right? Let's put that aside for a second. The second part of it is neither of these sound like they're developed enough to really take all of your time, right? And to borrow something from physics, right? Like the fire isn't it doesn't get any less hot just because you have 2 irons on it. So that whole quote is stupid, right? Because it's in parallel, it's not in series. Unless you put the irons on top of each other, then it's in series. But anyway, the point is, but that doesn't negate your issue of like, what do I spend my mental capacity on, right? Schools are gonna go back, right? Like, no matter what happens as the fallout for this, like we've got thousands of colleges in this country, like schools are gonna go back. And all the problems and pros and cons with them are going to come back, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing, this note sharing thing, I mean, it's tough. So there's a ton of things out there that compete with you, whether you think they do or not, right? Like anything like Google Docs, whatever, competes with you. OneNote competes with you. Piazza competes with you. Blackboard competes with you. Notion, like anything. On the other hand, there's this website. I don't know if anybody knows it. It's called Teachers Pay Teachers. Anybody whose friend or wife or husband is a teacher? No? So there's this website called Teachers Pay Teachers or Paying Teachers. I don't know. You can Google it. You'll find it. But basically, it's teachers that I mean, everybody knows the problem. Like, you know, they pay for a lot of their own materials, they're underpaid, et cetera, right? So there's this platform that somebody put out a few years ago where, like, you as a teacher, if you've put together something that you think other educators could make use of, it's like an Etsy shop for teachers, basically. So if you like put together like a little worksheet for like 2nd grade English or like 3rd grade math or whatever it is, you put it out there and you make it like $1, $2. So like if you're a teacher or if you're like homeschooling your kids or whatever, like go and buy this thing. It'll save you a couple hours putting it together. And it's the same marketing, it's the same financial model as Etsy, right? Like they take 20% of like whatever, right? Or like roughly 20%. I don't know the exact number, right? So they found a niche and they're like exploiting the shit out of it. Like this thing, like whoever's running it, I mean, they're making millions of dollars a year, right? Because the price point of most of these things are like $1 or $2, but there's not a teacher in this country that hasn't used it. It's insane, right? And I look at some of the stuff on there and I'm like, I should make a worksheet. Like, this is so easy, right? Robert, I love you on mute because I can get all the facial expressions without having to hear it.
I'm the best on mute. Less volume, more just facial expressions.
But basically, there are companies that found their niche, but it's hard to find your niche, and also you have to be in the like you have to be embedded in that domain. Like the companies that go after a niche is because the founders are in that niche. You being a student is not niche-y enough to capture that. Does that make sense? I wouldn't pursue that. And I've been wrong before, but I wouldn't pursue that. But anybody can jump in and tell me I'm wrong. We have 10 comments. Sorry, I'm doing a really terrible job of like keeping up.
I was gonna make a suggestion to you, saying if you if you maybe can think about what the student population has in common with, let's say, a different sector, maybe there's some overlap where you can build your MVP based on, you know, a common framework, and that's your competition to, or sorry, that's your what you would build. And yeah, you need to worry about the competition, but maybe, you know, things like Notion, Google Docs, all that stuff. You know, maybe that's an additive play, which is, yeah, they probably do a good job organizing and sorting, but maybe you're that value add on top that doesn't necessarily have to make them change their user behavior of using their favorite tool, which is also another thing you have to consider.
Yeah.
So you'll have people who love repositories in Notion, or will just share Google Docs like crazy, or Evernote, or whatever. And maybe you're that framework that builds on top of it.
Yeah, it's tough though. You know, I think Ignacio dropped off, but there's this really important idea of table stakes, right? It's something that we go over in the Founder Institute class. But basically, so imagine this. Imagine we live in a world where chairs don't have armrests, right? Like a horrible world, right? And then you have this great idea of like, I'm going to build a chair with armrests, right? And it's going to just like, I'm going to own the market, right? Like, because why would you buy a chair without armrests if you can have armrests, right? And you have this amazing idea. And it's awesome, except to build a chair with armrests, first you have to build a chair, right? So like 95% of your effort is like you have to build a chair, and then you have to add the 5%, which is your armrests, right? And if your chair doesn't function as a chair, no one's going to care that it has armrests, right? So when you're talking about a platform where students can take notes and sell their notes and all this kind of stuff, the table stakes there is you have to match the functionality of other platforms where you could take notes, right? And so there's all these companies out there whose core competence is platforms that take notes. OneNote, Notion, Evernote, etc., right? And if your basic note-taking functionality is not up to like snuff, doesn't have the table stakes, then no one's going to care about the rest, right? And so that puts your entire idea in a different perspective, right? Because do you want to spend 90% of your effort, 95% of your effort building another Evernote? A, no. B, you can't, because they've spent millions of dollars building it, right? So it's just it's an uphill battle. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah, and that's actually a really, that comes up all the time, right? Like I spoke with a company a few months ago that's like, you know, they came up with like a really cool thing having to do with like buying airline tickets. And their idea was actually cool, except like in order to implement their idea, they have to first build Kayak, right? Like, so, you know, like it's a great idea. And they're like, oh yeah, Kayak is like an exit strategy for us. I'm like, no, you first have to build Kayak to build your thing, right? Like,
well, most of their engineers are up on the market.
Yeah.
So
no, but still, it's tough. It really is tough. You know, the other side of that coin is like, maybe you could figure out some sort of a plugin where like, if I'm on Google Docs, like, you know, for example, right now I could like share my Google Doc with someone. If you could add like a Chrome plugin or something like that, where you add a paywall to it, maybe there's something there. I think I just came up with actually a really good idea. But but that's what you do, like you know, build on the shoulders of giants, basically. Don't try to rebuild.
Yeah, just to clarify really quickly, that is the intention of the platform. I think I might have like misconstrued it as like being a direct competitor to like Canvas and Blackboard and whatnot, but more so trying to solve like the niche of the one student who always takes really great colored notes in class in the notebook, and then at the end of the year sells it for $20 to, somebody from the next incoming class. Like those kinds of individuals who just take these great notes on their own, then being able to upload them via Google Docs, Microsoft Word, Excel docs, like all those current platforms, and then just having a viewership.
Yeah, but how?
So, like viewership based on credit.
Yeah, so how do you still need to like put a paywall in front of it. You have to like build a collection of these things. I mean, it's tough. Plus it's one of those things where I'm not going to pay for someone's notes unless I could see an example of their notes. And so how do you, I don't know. Anyway, no, it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. Focus on the other one. The other one has its own problems. Like anytime you're doing hardware, your hardware is going to break. But that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, I would just from my experience working at so I worked for defense for a little while doing building products, and part of my job was to take a look at what were the adjacent markets with the technology. So I understood the technology that existed, and then I understood the user space and how. The key to that was that their technical expertise was very difficult to replace, very expensive to replace. And the pushback that I constantly got was, well, if there's another big competitor in there, then how are we going to beat them, and what's the cost going to be to that? So you might have a large target audience, but your competitor space sounds pretty high as well.
Yeah, that's Lowell. Thank you. That's actually really spot on, and it's a thing that I do a lot of pitch competitions, and a lot like every once in a while, and like once a month, I would say, somebody comes to me and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're building something, and like Yelp is like our target acquisition." And you look at what they're building, and it's like Yelp already has that. They're like one weekend work away from it, and you ask them like, "Oh well, like what's preventing Yelp from doing it or something?" And they're like, "Oh well, Yelp doesn't want to do it." Like that's not a thing, right? So like in general, competition that's at your level, like if you're trying to do something, there's a couple other startups that are doing the same thing. That's good because that proves that there's a market, right? Competition that's like Google or Facebook, that's like one hackathon away from just like blowing you out of the water, that's not competition, and it's not a target acquisition, right? That's just like a waste of your time.
Great way to put it. Thank you.
Yeah.
That goes for like, let me find the best restaurant around, let me find the best party around, let me find the best bar around. Like, there's like a dozen of those every year coming out of every university, and it's painful.
Yeah. What's her name? There's one in Boston. Deirdre. I forget her last name, but she's doing something where instead, so you put in your vibe, like what vibe you want, and then it's actually called Vibes. VYBZ something. I don't know. She's doing pretty well. She crowdfunded it. Come on. She crowdfunded it. She raised some money. She built an MVP. That's more than most people could say, and she's doing something with it.
Soon she'll be a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
All right.
But like Tommy, I don't know you, but you're young, like you're in school, and like before you have to start paying off student loans, if you will have to or not, or before you take on a mortgage, like this is a great time for you to take advantage of your flexibility as a student to try out different ideas and to learn from those mistakes. And obviously, like you want to learn from other people's mistakes, and you want to build on the shoulders of giants, and you want to do all these things. Like all these folks have like great advice, but at the same time, you want to get scuffed up and and learn from that. And so like certainly like you want to avoid any unnecessary pain, but go out and try stuff. I mean, like, it might be that for whatever reason on your campus, like your little note-taking thing ends up exploding and becoming huge, and then we're all fucking wrong. So like, I mean, not to take away from like, from anyone else's advice, but like, I see stuff that like doesn't make sense that ends up taking off, and it defies all the rules and laws that we come up with from like a business perspective or a technical perspective. So that still happens too, right? They're like wild cards. So
yeah,
you're young, so like, make some mistakes and have some fun. And
no, that's Diego. Thank you for saying that. That's the best time to make mistakes. Well, it's always, but certainly when you're younger, because you could turn them around, right? Like, I'm much less risk averse now, and I'm not that old, than I was, let's say, 15 years ago. Yeah.
Anyway, on that note, I need to bounce, but this was awesome. So thanks, Igor.
That's what happens when you're in paradise. You just want to take off early.
Yeah, you get pina coladas,
Oh yeah. But thanks, Igor and Robert, for putting this on. I always love
Michelle.
Yeah. No, this is Michelle's thing today. Host. Yeah, and we're gonna do we're gonna do more of these. We're gonna do more of these. There were 50 RSVPs, but with these virtual events, I think people don't take enough, put enough weight on them. So we'll figure it out.
All right, bye guys.
Bye. Thanks for coming, Diego. Yeah. Anybody else? Guys, so John's still here and I'm still here. John's down there with a fancy background. I'm in space. Eric, you've got that's a custom background, right? You don't have like a full bar in your living room, right?
What are you talking about? This is the basement. Kate, come on over since you're nearby.
Yeah. No,
that's a famous spot in San Francisco, isn't it? Is that the house of prime rib, or the house of what is that?
Unfortunately, just a random photo. I don't think it's
a random to you. That might actually be a place. I don't know. Yeah, I see we've got the bean up on top, everyone. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So I'm here. I'm here till at least the end of my drink right here. So if anybody has any other questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Guys, like the whole idea here is both for this event and in general is to be able to save time and money by asking John, Diego, me, other CTOs questions that can shortcut you weeks or months of doing something wrong. So,
and please ask questions, because I'm seeing the email notifications and they're all about the PPP. So I don't want to answer those. So if I'm in an event live, it helps. So someone please ask another question, because as soon as this is over, I have to answer a bunch of emails.
Wait, Robert, I have a question for you.
Oh shit! Oh no.
No. This is a real question, and I realize that it's April 2nd. It's not April 1st. This is not a joke. But as of yesterday, I have a new job as an employee of FastCTO, because I'm finally my own employee. My boss is a dick.
I heard he's bald too.
Yeah, he's just, and it's a very hostile work environment. He never wears pants. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But tell me, for folks that have small businesses, right? Because like a lot of people that have startups, they're not paying themselves, whether they have an LLC or an S corp or whatever. If they start in the middle of this whole thing, what benefits can they like? Was there a deadline by which they would have had to be employees or something else for them to reap any of these benefits that are potentially out there?
Not that I know of, and that's sort of the part of the problem is that people are starting to add like themselves as employees and paying themselves less than $100,000 to qualify for it. Like, so you're seeing a lot of $99,999 employees. So they haven't figured that out yet, and that's part of the slowdowns. Like, when you're doing a program that's basically a grant, you have to understand that people are going to try to find loopholes and exploit them. So you becoming an employee and paying yourself, not a surprise.
No, I actually did it regardless of, I meant to do it in February, but I couldn't get my shit together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I don't know. They haven't really set the guidelines for what they want to see as far as like how long does an employee need to be paying themselves to qualify? How, like, we don't know. Like, we honestly, as of when I jumped onto this call, we don't know. As lenders, we don't know. And as the SBA, they haven't defined that. So until there's some guidance around what that looks like, the restriction, you know, pay yourself or have yourself on payroll. But I think they're going to be looking at like payroll taxes being paid in prior 12 months to sort of say you've been paying employees or you haven't.
Got it. That's good.
Everyone we've talked to so far has basically said if you're co-founders and you've been sort of like, you know, as a co-founder you take out as much as you need, not more than you need, right? So you just keep invested in the business. You're pretty much fucked.
Yeah, that was my kind of understanding. By the way, for anyone that doesn't have context, because we didn't really do like introductions. Robert is a big wig. Yes, that is a wig over at First Republic Bank. So any bank, yeah, it's a wig. He uses good glue, but it's a wig.
Don't be jealous. Don't be jealous.
It's a merkin he repurposed.
Oh, God damn it. Okay.
But any banking questions, definitely redirect them because I don't know.
I think Ryan hit it on the head. Like, if you haven't been paying yourself, like, it's going to be problems. I imagine it's going to be problems for qualifying for this. It's going to literally be, it's for your employees. So if you have employees you've been paying legally as employees through and paying payroll taxes, this is going to be a pretty easy process. And if you're trying to do that now, I don't know what that's going to look like as far as like look back, but I can't imagine they're going to be like, oh, you started paying them as soon as we announced the PPP. I doubt that's going to work.
I actually have more of like a sort of like a, you know, a question. Obviously, this is to help employees, right? But what does everybody think about like business continuity after this? Like, are companies going to survive? Because I was on a call earlier that basically said you can go out of business during this. We'll help you pay your employees through that whole process. But we're not really concerned about you being in business after this. It's more about making sure that people are paying them money to pay their own bills, at least for the next few months.
I mean, that's loaded. That's a loaded gun.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what politicians look at. Jobs, they look at joblessness numbers, they look at the employment numbers as being the guideline for success, and entrepreneurs look at like how much their, you know, companies valuated at, which are completely, those aren't aligned interests at all. So,
but it differs by state too, right? Like you have the benefit of being in Massachusetts, which is pretty enlightened, you know. So,
clearly, but
not every.
The reality is
but politicians couldn't have predicted 20% unemployment. That's like way beyond their capability to understand anything, right?
Well, this is the first time, at least my like that I understand it. Like, nobody around the globe is operating business as usual, and so I don't know what this is going to mean for your company in particular. But I do know is that they're trying, like every politician is trying to figure out how to leverage this to their advantage. So they're trying to figure out, how do I spin this and make this a part of my platform that will help me get reelected this fall? So assume that most of them are going to err on the side of being business friendly, employee friendly. And they're trying, and they want to project an image of protecting the American people and the American working man and woman as much as possible. So I don't know. I don't know if that's best for your business, but I think I think founders fall into two buckets right now. It's either survive and like figure out how to weather the storm, or if you're in a business that's going to thrive in this environment, how to leverage the assets you have to be really take advantage of the environment. And those are two really big juxtapositions that are very, very, very far apart from each other. But they're the reality of what we're seeing. And I don't see a lot of middle ground of like, hey, we're going to try to continue growing our business, but cut costs. It seems to be either one of the two: bunker down and try to weather this and survive, or maximize this opportunity because you're never going to get it again.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm seeing that from both startups, like the folks that we work with. Honestly, to really like double down on what Robert is saying. So, our whole goal is to work with super early stage startups. So for most of our clients, if you don't have anything, you're not affected by all business being shut down because you've got nothing yet, right?
It's the best possible.
Yeah, exactly. So all of our, like March has been our literal best month to date, because everybody's like, let's use this pause to like focus and do the thing that we need to do, right?
It's actually great for us too.
Yeah, it might be
the earlier you are, the better. If you're far down the pipeline and you're in the Excel spreadsheet investors section, so Series A and beyond, where they're literally saying, we gave you this much money, we need this much output, you might be fucked. If you're earlier than that, you might be okay, depending on how lean you're running your ship. So there's really no thumb here. But
yeah, so like for like super early stuff, this is great. Well, not great, but it's a no-op. It's a no-op, right? Like let's just keep doing, because by the time we're done, things will be semi back to normal, right? For some of our later stage clients, or for clients that depend on brick and mortar businesses, it's a tough time, right? Because
they're toast.
Yeah, if their clients are, coffee shops, all coffee shops are closed, right? Like it's tough, right?
Is that a pun?
Huh?
Yes. It was very funny of me.
Toast.
I said they're toast.
I get it.
It goes way off.
Yeah. But also, like, what things don't, what people don't really think about, at least in Boston, right? Because like Boston is such a heavy startup community. We sometimes forget that there's like, most small businesses in Boston aren't startups, or in Massachusetts aren't startups, right? Like we live in a little bit of a bubble where like everybody we talk to, like, oh, what startup do you have? What startup do you have? Right? But like, there's a lot of small businesses that are just like not startups, that are going out of business left and right. Like actually most people on this call now aren't even from Boston, but there's this place called Inman Oasis in Cambridge that just sent out an email the other day saying like they're closing. They've been like a staple of Cambridge for 30 years. It was a weird staple. It was like a communal hot tub, but it was a staple of Cambridge for 30 years. Don't ask me why I'm on the mailing list.
I want to be the face of Me 2.2.0. Like, come on, man, keep it together.
It was a very nice. It was a very nice thing. Anyway, there's a lot of companies going out of business that don't have the benefit. Like they're not in the same kind of ecosystem as all the accelerators and the venture cafes and this and that and all that. You've got a lot of just like,
Igor, I think what we're seeing right now is what's a nice business and that has benefited from being in a 12-year bull economy, and what's an essential business, what people can't live without. And it's really interesting to, like, I don't know where the chip's going to fall on this, but it's really interesting to see what companies are going to like really be effective, because they're offering real value to real companies that it's essential basically to continue on doing business, and what has just been fluff. And I think we're going to see that more and more. And I don't think we're really going to see it for another 12 months. I think we're seeing part of it right now. Some of the chips are falling. the reality of what's really going to hit is probably 12 to 18 months from now.
Insightful.
I try to sound insightful.
No, you're.
We definitely saw that, 10 years ago, with the recession. I mean, I worked in a whole different, universe then in bio and pharma, and we basically rode the wave and waited for it to go back up again because, it was an essential necessity. Everyone needed.
But it's a good way to see how current proof you are, right? Like I'll tell you. So I'm an idiot, I guess. One of my first major startups, I started in literally September of 2001, which was not a good day. My second major startup I started in 2008.
And you just started FastCTO and ushered in COVID-19.
No,
thank you, Igor, you son of a bitch.
I'm like the voodoo doll you poke apparently. But look, it's one of those things that you gotta you do what you do. But this is a good test for an unfortunate test for a lot of us, but it's a good test for a lot of us. Guys, we have a question from Facebook. We're live. By the way, I don't know. Let me remind you guys, we're live. Literally anyone in the world can look at us from.
It's not the essence of the www. www is like closed.
No. We're open. We're www worldwide www. But we've got. I'm gonna butcher your name. I'm sorry. It's Abovi Ariovodi, I think. Tell me how close I was. How do you? I'm gonna put this up on the screen. I should have gone into TV production. How do you find the right technical partner as a co-founder? Abovi, we talked about this a little bit earlier on our call. In fact, I'm gonna make sure I save this actually, and it's gonna go into our channel on YouTube and Facebook. But the first question actually from Mr. Croissant was all about that. But really, really quickly, just to touch on that, it's hard. Out of all the startups that go out of business, it's really one of the two. Either you're out of money or your co-founders suck, and you might be the co-founder that sucks. But basically, that's really the two dualities, right? You're either out of money or you're right. Because remember, even a bad idea can thrive if you throw enough money at it. So it's always a money or co-founder issue.
Igor, the co-founder might not suck. Your just chemistry might be off.
Yeah, for sure.
You might be
yes,
a great founder or a great co-founder, but you're just not great for each other, and that happens more often than we'd like to admit.
That's a really good point. Yes, 100%. My best friend, we were roommates for one semester in college after we were friends, and we wanted to kill each other when we were roommates. And then we basically said, never again, right? We're still best friends, but we will never, well, at this point, it doesn't matter, right? We're both married, whatever. But just because you're two good people doesn't mean you're a good co-founder. So basically, finding the right co-founder is very hard. Finding the right technical partner is even harder. The good news, and again, disclaimer, this is not a sales for FastCTO, but check out FastCTO because honestly, it's about 50-50. Half our clients are non-technical. Half our clients have technical co-founders. And what we bring to the table is making sure you're doing the right thing regardless of whether you're technical or not. I know it's a salesy kind of answer, but just check it out. And I'm happy to answer more questions.
Hey, Igor, I have a question for you. This
Sure.
is probably a good wrap-up question. curious because, you know, normally I work for GSV Labs. I get to see my startups in the space every day and kind of hear about the pressures that they're going through. What are some of your clients right now? Like, what are they working through? What's like the biggest thing you're giving advice on, you know, from a technical side of things? You know, what's kind of top of mind to everyone that you're working with?
That's a good question. So I'll say this. My answer is gonna suck. Because my answer is not what you're looking for. Because again, most of the startups that we focus on, this is a passing thing for them, right? Because they're not so established that like a shake in the world economy matters to them, right? So, you know, for clients that were working on their MVP in February, they're still working on it in March, and they're still going to be working on it in April, right? For clients that already are out and live and doing things, if they're in an industry that's affected by this, they're screwed. And if they're not, right? Like it really, I think Robert kind of pointed this out, like there's no gray area. Either this affects you or it doesn't. So like FastCTO and our clients, for the most part, it doesn't, except for a couple of examples, right? For some of like, I have a lot of friends that have more traditional businesses, and either, as Robert said, either this is like a boom for them and they're like, okay, how do we take advantage of this time the most effective way without seeming sleazy, right? Because there's this like weird side effect where like if you're not suffering, people think you're an asshole, but like maybe you're just not suffering, you know, or you're just like, it really sucks for you, and then you're trying to make the best of it. So I mean,
that's a great point, Igor. Like I think that even the companies that are like, hey, this is a great opportunity for us, they're grappling with this idea of like, how do I go after new business when the reality is that most people are suffering and losing their jobs and they're going out of business? How do I like message that without being offensive? Like it's a really tough time. I think it's actually not your generation because you're old as shit, but like my generation is the first real.
We're the same age.
I know, but I look so much younger. It's the first real adversity that we've faced at scale. Like that, it's
no. Remember that summer there was a shortage of avocado toast, Robert?
No.
We seriously have. We were putting together all of our. I think I brought this up at the last event you guys had. But it was like, how do you put together all those required documents and like security and all that? One of them was for the bank that we're partnering with. One of them was a pandemic response policy, like literally, and nobody had ever thought of that and thought it would never happen. But it hasn't.
No, I mean you do. I mean, at least we do. We do crisis management situations for massive events, but like this is unprecedented in the sense that the entire supply chain of the entire world is just shut down. Like this is short of a nuclear war, you would not see this. This is completely unprecedented.
Yeah.
Even during world wars, there were still things happening. This is completely different.
Yeah, and I'll say that there's actually my last company, because we had to actually provide, as part of like SOC 2 and a couple of ISOs, we had to provide disaster recovery, redundancy, all this kind of stuff, and like high availability for our services. And I was talking to someone the other day about this. I literally remember a question where so we were hosted. Part of our thing was in Azure at the time. This is about 6 years ago. It was part in Azure and part in AWS, right? And we had like the most expensive high availability, because we have hospital clients and we had bank clients. Like it was pretty high tech. So we had the most expensive high availability thing you could think of, where we had the whole thing running live in Northeast, and in California, basically at the same time, like live updating, like it was like $100,000 a month just to keep this thing running. And our like position on this was that, like, you know, if there's an earthquake in California, like California drops off the map, no problem, we've got New York. If there's like a thing in New York, like no problem, we've got California. If both of those are off at the same time, like we've got bigger issues than worrying about our business, right? And that's like what we're in right now. Like, you know, we've sold the company, like I don't deal with that anymore, but like I can't even imagine what they're going through right now, because like this was always a thing that was like such a hypothetical.
Igor, imagine if the internet went down right now.
Well, it would.
The internet went down right now,
Robert. It would mess with our live feed, which has 1 viewer and 2 likes on Facebook.
No, not that. It's like literally. I know you're being funny, but like, how many people literally are just like depending on the internet? There's just to survive right now. It's incredible. I mean, they're talking about like doing bandwidth issues, so they're trying to cut down how much data people are able to use, because there's so many bandwidth issues with this many people being at home. Like, we thought people were streaming movies at work. They had no idea how much more they could stream if they're like literally at home like watching, you know, Netflix while they're quote unquote working.
Oh,
what's this?
I don't know what this is.
What is that?
This is the new reality.
Who's sharing that?
That's me, Eric.
Yeah.
Right. So Maslov has been rewritten because of COVID.
All right. I like this. Is this streaming? Yeah, this is out. I didn't know people had permission to do that, but I'm loving it.
Everyone sees it.
Robert, don't get any ideas. Don't share your screen, please.
Everybody. So the craziest part is, though, I mean, we're all sitting here laughing about it, but the brick and mortars are really, really suffering.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends and former coworkers that are in the restaurant business, and it really sucks. I think we're going to come out of this with 50% less of the restaurants that we were used to in Boston, especially. You know.
Yeah.
I said to Louis Belosny on the last day I was in the city, really, what I said to him, I think the city we come back to is going to be vastly different from the city we left. And the hardest hit area will probably be Chinatown, where they were like experiencing like prejudice for 2 months leading up to the shutdown. And the reality is, like, they're going to be hurt the most by this. And that's literally the most underdeveloped situation in Boston. So there's going to be some commercial real estate plays that happen as far as purchasing and acquiring those spaces that people had traditionally held out on and said, hey, we want to keep this as part of the Chinatown DNA. And that's going to go away. And I don't think it's a good thing for us. I think, like, it hurts a lot. I think we're going to get a dilution of the availability of options of businesses.
You really think in Boston that's going to be a problem? Like, I've been getting sushi every other day. Like,
it is going to be a problem, because you're a forward-thinking person. As much as I hate to admit it, a lot of people like they won't go into Chinatown. They won't order anything from Chinatown because they're so afraid of contracting COVID-19. When most of Chinatown and Boston is Taiwanese, they're not even Chinese.
Yeah,
I'm still shopping at 88 supermarket and
it's great.
And fresh. You know, that's the only place you can find toilet paper.
Those are the ones that like have no lines.
Shameless plug, not for myself, but in the chat, this is a company, a thing that my buddy launched called Merch for Relief, and they take all of the sort of restaurants that are suffering, put their logos on some kick-ass shirts and sweatshirts, and everything that you buy goes directly to those restaurants so they can pay their employees.
I gotta say, I might be naive, but I think Boston's actually coming together pretty well around restaurants. Like, Every time I pull up Facebook or something else, it's always like do takeout here. Uber Eats dropped their fees, Grubhub dropped their fees. I'm doing takeout every other day. I know a lot of my friends are. Again, I think we're more enlightened, as Robert says, than others. But
we're just more yuppies. We like to live
I guess.
Is it the same on the West Coast?
The restaurants I talked to on the West Coast, they're trying as hard as they can. San Francisco, I know they're struggling a lot though.
It's a per capita thing, right? Like I think Boston has like a good balance of restaurants per capita, whereas like New York, I think they have more restaurants I think New York will actually have more restaurants go out of business, just because there's not, people aren't really.
So shameless plug, I'm gonna put it out there. Me and a couple of people are planning a Boston's back party when we finally get released from this self quarantine situation.
That's how people get COVID, Robert.
No, we're gonna wait until the coast is clear. I'm not a dummy, and not too much of a dummy. Questionable. Okay, but the idea was like we're gonna do a scavenger hunt through Chinatown to go to like a dozen restaurants in Chinatown and like purchase their signature item in their menu. Yeah, and then we're gonna have a big party to celebrate us actually being able to get back together in person and have a good time.
What people don't know is Robert can't handle more than like one maki roll of sushi, so him doing a.
Dude, we both know that's bullshit. You saw me.
I saw you eat like two rolls maybe.
Igor, you saw me.
All right.
Don't lie. You know. So Igor and I went to Chinatown and had a sushi lunch that the waitress literally said, "You guys can't eat this much. There's no way you'll eat this much." We ate every fucking piece of that roll. We had, I don't know, man. How many rolls?
We had more sushi than like a regular person should eat, for sure.
More sushi than you guys have on Facebook right now watching this.
But that's a very low bar. That's a very low bar.
Yeah, that's a really low bar.
Look,
by the way,
I didn't do it.
Better fucking survive. I'm pissed. That place is gold.
That place is gonna be fine. That place is gonna be fine.
Oh my god.
That's amazing. Listen, guys, it's 8:00 on the East Coast. It sounds like we may, unless Kate, who's a late addition, has a technical question. And looks like Kate and Eric are both on a different side of the same bar. Perhaps.
I finally found my fancy bar photo, so I thought I'd turn the video on. I don't have a tech question, but just from the West Coast side, this was awesome to chime in and kind of see how this event generally runs and kind of how you guys approach questions. Love to do this again, especially during virtual time. Love to kind of keep joining.
I really, now that like everybody's virtual and coordinating is logistically much easier. This could be something that's every week, every other week, something like that. Robert's not going to turn down a chance to drink.
We could do a weekly Wednesday down. Honestly, this is one of the. If a founder comes on here and asks the question they want and get the answer they need, it's more valuable than 90% of the content that's out there. So it doesn't cost us anything except for our time to do this. We're happy to do it virtually. Well, I'm saying that for Igor. He's like, fuck you, my time.
No, listen, guys, I don't know if anybody could hear, but I've got a child crying in the background, and this is a nice respite. Because my day has changed a bit. I've got 2 kids, and I mean, I love them, but they're always here.
Igor, I'm gonna look like you by the time this is over.
Just really good looking? I don't understand. Is that an insult or a compliment?
Shorter, balder.
All right. But anyway, thank you guys, everyone. I'm going to save this. It's going to be on our YouTube channel, if I could figure out and not press anything wrong. And then let me work with Michelle of Host, Robert of First Republic, Seth of GSV, and let's see if we can get this up and going. You know, maybe even every Wednesday, maybe every other Wednesday, something like that. Now and after quarantine's over, I really believe in this event because you know, it's not like we reach 1,000 founders every time, but the founders that we reach, I think we give really valuable questions that sometimes change the course of their startup or even their life sometimes. So
it's not the broadest spectrum of founders. It's not the biggest audience, but I think it's one of the more impactful event series that happens in Boston. Saying.
I appreciate that, Robert. Yeah. Okay. So have a good night. And keep an eye out for the next one that could be very, very soon.
Be safe, people.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.